So in this part, I want to look at the weakening pattern, the reenactment of traumatic pattern that happened with Peter Santel in the second wave, just in summary. And I also want to begin by saying that psychedelics are boundary dissolving tools. They dissolve boundaries between individuals and between the self. Trauma is a boundary creating mechanism. Trauma begins by dividing the self, disconnecting the empathic emotional self, and engaging a deep survival circuit in human beings that helps us cope with fight, flight, and freeze. In an unsafe environment, we divide ourselves to protect the overall self. It's kind of like hiding money in different parts, of the environment, so that one part survives, so that it's not all wiped out. And simultaneously, by dissociating our emotions, it helps us react instinctively, more rapidly. It's not a reflective reaction, it's a survival reaction. And finally, because traumatic emotions cannot be dealt with alone, because of our core pack species, traumatic emotions, including shame and traumatic experiences, must be dealt with in community. Or they don't feel safe, or the trauma often remains in a dissociated state. The trauma must be repaired. So when that doesn't happen, we partition parts of ourselves. Certain emotions are suppressed. They're not safe to feel. In the most evil pattern within the culture, we are first wounded, then abandoned in the wound, then punished for speaking about the wound, and then told that we are insane. And if we don't agree that we're insane and forget about it and be silent, we will be further traumatized by the culture. And you've got a pretty surefire cage there. You've got the soul, the spirit, the consciousness pretty well sealed in. It's pretty hard to break out of that. If you've got it stuck in your body, that giving yourself or anyone else the information that you're stuck jeopardizes your survival. I mean, now you've completely turned the self in on itself. You ask that person, do you want to know where you're stuck and traumatized, where you're in prison, how you've been abused? No, I don't want to know. To know is dangerous. To know is the beginning of a battle I can't win against a sick and sociopathic culture that doesn't care about me as much as it cares about maintaining the status quo. And so I don't want to know. Okay, you've got a caged system which, when that goes unconscious, you've got no choice but to play that out. How can you resist embodying that pattern to your children if you can't even afford to face what it is? You can't. You're stuck. Because just to admit what's going on is traumatic. And at the moment you most need community to be there with you, they're all turning against you. It's my biggest crisis with the whole high episode. To talk about this crisis shakes the security of a percentage of people who are in a child-parent state with the high facilitators. A child-parent state that is fostered by an environment of performance and denial, in which the humanity takes place behind closed doors, and the unconditional love performance takes place out in the room, in which we're the facilitators and you're not. This fosters a parent-child dynamic. Once that dynamic is fostered, it's neither good nor bad, it's just a dynamic. It's a dynamic many abused people are predisposed to, because the trauma freezes you at a predetermined age. If the trauma happens when you're 2, there's a part frozen at 2 years old, and there's a magnetic force back to that age. It's very easy to trigger someone who's had a trauma at a certain age that isn't resolved back to that age. Now, as soon as they're 2 years old, who's the parent? Whoever is the authority, the protector, who's saying, we love you, that's the parent. So, a 2-year-old, my siblings, when I tried to advocate for them as a teenager, they didn't like it. They couldn't do anything about it. My parents' dis-ease was the most stable thing in their life, and they were clinging for dear life. And this creates, the stronger the abuse, the more the person can't afford to think and look objectively, which increases the dependence. So it's a vicious circle, because this need for certainty is very strong. So the team and participants who are in a child-parent dynamic with the facilitators, or with high in general, with the room of love, the parent, as I was, and some part of me still is, do not want the sanctity of that presumed perfection threatened. So who's the enemy? Anyone who's revealing what's under the carpet. That's the enemy. That's the enemy of the child. So the biggest wound, in many ways, that an abuser, and I don't like that term, someone who is hosting the pattern of abuse, which we all host unless we get it out of our system. We are all born chauvinists in the United States. By the time you're 2 years old, you know that feminine energy is not as valuable as masculine energy. You can't miss it. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. It's masculine women that are more valuable than feminine women. It's masculine men that are more valuable than feminine men. You are a chauvinist. You've got it. To survive, you start playing that game. You are a chauvinist unless you heal your chauvinism. You can't heal the chauvinism unless you see the pattern, unless you start watching the way that no one wants to listen, because talking, the talker, is valued more than the listener. Well, isn't that a joke? Does a speaker's voice mean anything at all if no one's listening? It doesn't. It has no meaning, no value. Does a listener's skill have any value at all if no one's speaking? It doesn't. There is an equal pairing between speaking and listening. Neither has value without the other. It is equal. Feminine and masculine energy are an equal pairing. And the great absurdity of Western culture is the mythology, starting with a rib from Adam, carrying on with the financial reward system, with the shaming, with the jokes, with the whole thing, you know. In China, the one-child policy, women are thrown in dumpsters so that they can have one child, but it's a boy. We have chauvinism unless we heal it. We host a wide variety of culturally sanctioned, abusive systems, abusive to our spirit, to our heart, unless we cast them out. I am not singling out Peter or any of the high facilitators as being unusually bad, unusually incompetent, unusually evil, unusually unethical. They're just Americans. The problem comes when we're trying to outgrow a sick cultural dynamic, when people who have not healed the pattern or prepared or understood the pattern put themselves forward for money as the beacons of the healed state and just perpetuate the disease. That is sick. Because if you buy into it and you get worse, you associate with that with love, or you associate this is not right. That's the problem. And so if these human beings were putting what I'm describing here forward as, sorry, this is just the best we can do, we're fucked up human beings like everyone else, here's your money back, let's learn from this, how can we get you some help from people who know what we're doing, know what we're doing, and how can we learn and change, and we want to learn everything we can, no problem, that's healthy. The problem is that's not what's happening. This has become a political issue. It's hard to find men who are even as good as Peter in this culture. It's hard to find a loving, warm man who can embody this incredibly complicated high facilitator role, who wants to, and who is not predatorily and sexual, and who knows what they're doing. It's very hard to find. Peter is an excellent high facilitator of what's out there. That doesn't mean he's equipped to work with someone like me one-on-one, and he's obviously not equipped to discern whether or not he's equipped. That's a problem. It's a problem for you. It's a problem for your children. It's a problem for who you recommend to high. Because high in its infinite wisdom is saying this isn't their problem. That's a big problem. A problem they're creating that isn't their problem, which means it's going to continue. That's a big problem. It's a problem if the people most abused by the problem are so weakened and devastated by the problem that they can't help the problem, and that they are pushed into that corner by the facilitators who don't want to deal with the problem. That's a problem. It's a problem if a participant trusts the facilitators, works with a facilitator, ends up getting hurt, and then has $100,000 of their equity wiped out, can't function in their life, loses their community, goes through a massive amount of shame and addiction, and is left on their own by people who want to keep the secret more than they want to help. That's a problem. That's a big, big problem. Because when that's called love, and these are called teachings, we can't grow. We're bumping up against the wound and it's masquerading as salvation. It's fine to bump up against the wound and say, this is the wound, this is the best we know how to do, and don't pay us money for this. But to say, we love you and we're doing all this, and no, that's sick. Not sick in the shame sense that anything sick is to be shamed. Anything sick needs help. Peter Sandhill needs help. And that's what I asked for. I assumed the other facilitators were healthier than Peter in this scenario and would help him. Instead, at a time that I am in desperate need, Peter calls me and starts talking about maybe I'm going to have to move to Australia. Dane, you don't understand. Now that you've told this, the board is involved. I may lose my job. Da-da-da-da-da. He's terrified. How the fuck is he going to help me? For this whole wave that I don't even have language for when he's so focused on himself. How is he not going to be focused on himself if he doesn't have peers and friends who he trusts to be there for him? Like a healthy, sane, objective person would have asked for help. Peter didn't ask for help. Was this because he couldn't without being shamed within his community? Probably. That's not safe. A facilitator needs help too. They're just a human being holding the mantle. But there's plenty of areas they don't know what the fuck they're doing. And the trouble is not that. The trouble is if someone's got, whether it's a hero mentality or something where they can't admit it and they can't ask for help and they won't tell the participant. They won't tell the person paying and depending on them, I'm really sorry I'm out of my depth here. I'm really sorry. And it's a real problem if they're so small and they can't admit that they blame the client. You aren't doing your work here. You're using me. This is an imbalanced relationship. That is sick. It's a replaying of the wound without even taking the time to diagnose the wound. It's like a doctor who doesn't examine your arm, see a big sore there, doesn't take off your clothes, doesn't even look, doesn't ask any questions, and then before you leave, they jab into the same wound that was there and slice off another bit of skin and say, off you go. I've done my job. We know enough about physical ecology to not put up with that bullshit. But we don't know enough about emotional ecology to not have some doubt. Maybe it is my fault. And this is why we need clear people in leadership positions. We have so much crap on a cultural level. We do not need crap masquerading as healers and charging us money for more crap. We don't need that. So what's happened in this second play out is, again, no diagnosis. I've done my best to take control of the situation, realizing I cannot trust healers. After working with 30 of them in therapy, this, that, and the other, I cannot depend on a healer to know what they're doing. That's what I've learned after spending $250,000. So I'm taking the lead here. No more just let's expect a professional to know what they're doing now. I'm going to take the lead. I'm going to script this out, so you're not going to leave me till this time. Let's get it all in writing. Let's. I think I'm in unknown territory, but I'm doing that job. Peter's first influence is to ask me to take a higher dose of psychedelics than I want to take. That's his first influence. His first and only question to me is whether I want him to wear the white shirt or the other shirt. Seems reasonable preparation before doing one of the most profound opening healings of a lifetime. Which color shirt do you want me to wear? Seems professional enough. Wouldn't that be nice if when you went into surgery, wouldn't that be nice if rather than taking your vitals or doing any of that, your surgeon said, "Do you like these white doctor robes? Or how about something a little bit more casual? What about with a little red flare here before I slice you up without knowing what I'm doing? What would you like?" And so his one question, which shirt? I think I've got it covered because I'm trying to learn from the last healer that re-traumatized me when I woke up nearly dead with my first experience. But I don't know what I'm doing because I still don't know what I don't know. And here's where I want to interject something important. The dissociative patterns in trauma are to protect the self from emotions that are not safe within the culture and within the psychology for the self to deal with until such time as one person cares enough, loves enough, learns enough to actually show up and be there for that person to feel and reintegrate those wounds, cry together, weep together, see what's happening, give back the cultural shame to where it belongs, and become whole again. This is waiting in every one of us for a safe technology and a safe, stable human being to care that much for us, to do that, to welcome us home. And many of us will not encounter that in this lifetime. Many of us will go to our graves in this lifetime with our need for that not only unmet, but completely denied. Doesn't matter how much money we spend doing this, that, and the other. Many of us will die without receiving that, and that is a crime. It is a shame. It is our shame. It is our shame that our brightest minds are working on how to get people to click on more Google ads. Hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, 80-hour weeks. If we change the color, if we change the font, can we get people to buy something they don't need? And that's progress. Isn't it great? Here's a division for you. You got another 5% out of those populists. And who's working on this? Who's working on a simple questionnaire that has at least an 80% probability field of leading someone into potent knowledge that can change the potency of this lifetime and the relationships of everyone around them? Who is working on that and who is helping them? This is absurd. Is anyone paying attention? It is absurd. Peter's first influence, take more drugs. No one should take psychedelics, no one, until they know how to deal with trauma. They need to know the probability that they are in a repressed traumatic state, number one. Number two, they need to know what to do with repressed traumatic emotion when it comes up. They need to know what kind of support they need, and they need to secure that support. It needs to be there in advance. When my trauma came up with Peter, I asked the high facilitators to be my circle. Not in advance. Not in advance. I didn't know I would be needing that. I didn't know what trauma was when I hired Peter. I didn't know that I had it. I didn't know what was needed. If you are in a situation where someone you know is going to take psychedelics for the first time. Take a stand for their well-being. Take the time to show them something they may not know they don't know. Trauma is a survival coping mechanism that creates boundaries by partitioning the self. Psychedelics erases those boundaries, but it does not inherently teach the individual ego how to deal with it's like, if you can imagine a dam being built. Water's running through, it's becoming toxic. So the reptilian brain creates a dam so that that water will start to build up and be partitioned, and the toxin goes down to a manageable level. Psychedelics are going to put dynamite in that dam, and a flood of water is going to come down at a faster rate than would have happened if the partition had never been built. If you don't know what you're doing and you're hit with this water, you're going to be in a worse crisis than you were before. So what does that mean in practical terms? Take the Child Adverse Experiences Study, the ACE study. Look it up online. I'm including it and adding to it in my questionnaire. And assess your probability of trauma. Basically, every single one of the things on that study is a childhood trauma. Has that been repaired? Have you had a single safe person? Many people have not had a single safe, sane adult that they could talk to about these issues. See, and this is fucked over in a big way by this, these idiots that go around saying, let go of the past, just, in other words, throw away the key to the dissociated self you haven't even, that is in the present, in a dissociated state, that is influencing you from the unconscious without even knowing what it is. It's like you've got blocked memories in there, and you don't even own them to let go of them. Once you've connected with them, once you've followed through the traumatic thread back to who you are and brought and welcomed those parts home, then the memories have no more function. And you can let go of the memories because they no longer hold the key to the dissociated self. So there's a lot of confusion out there. Live in the present, let go. You're happy now, but look at the bright side. Look, in other words, ignore all the many parts of ourselves that have been buried so effectively that we don't even know they're there. Because we've been told that to be considered sane in this world, we've got to deny them, which is to become insane, to fit in to all the insanity around us, so that we look the same as all the other people who have denied those parts that have been butchered and cut off in themselves. This is what we're dealing with. Read the book. So take the Adverse Child, 10 minutes. You will have a sense of your probability. How many traumatic events? Just of 10. This is very, very, very crude. It's very rudimentary. Why not ask 100 questions about 100 traumatic? Why not ask about dogs that have, terrorized you? Why not ask about situations where you have abused someone else because you've been traumatized to such an extent by abusive parents you've become a bully? Have you ever been a bully? That's a traumatic event. Studies show that bullies are as depressed as their victims 30 years later. It's two sides of the same coin. They're not good guys and bad guys. There are people who interact with dissociative pain, and there are people that don't. And when people do, both people are affected. Do you think Peter is unaffected with devastating someone's life for several years and knowing he's having this impact and that he doesn't know what he's doing? Of course he's affected. He may be affected in some areas more than me. He may need more help than me at this juncture. Because for someone that needs to fix people, that needs to save people, that needs to be amazing, to make this amount of pain and demonstrate this level of incompetence is an ego-shattering experience. Peter may need enormous help, and the trouble, from my perspective, is he didn't get it. I asked the facilitators to help him. They intimidated him, which is why he leaned on me. This is evil. To abuse a child, to abuse a client or a patient, and then, Peter chose to be a part of this organization, the Human Awareness Institute. And when I asked to be held, and when I asked to be loved and to be listened to, not one person showed up to hold me. Not one person validated the feelings. Not one person made the time to listen that I asked for. Instead, high, at its current level of evolution in this pattern, hosted a facilitator meeting, taking 3 days to get there, in which no one would help me, in which I was not invited, in which my needs were not the primary concern, but meanwhile told Peter that the board was involved and that he had to come to this meeting. So when I was asking Peter for help, when Peter got his head around the fact and began to get some of his impact, doing me an enormous amount of good to have him listen. When we were making breakthroughs, and I said, carry on this conversation. I need peace and closure. I want another 8 hours to go through all this, to help you get it and to find closure around this. Can you give that as soon as possible? He said, no, I've got to go. I've got to go have this meeting. And when we're talking, he's not affirming and saying, I'm so sorry that I've let you down. I'm so sorry you had to drag everyone else in because I wouldn't listen. I didn't listen at this point. I didn't listen at this point. I didn't give you what you needed here. I didn't get you help. I did nothing that helped you. You had no choice. I'm so sorry I put you in this position. No. I'm never going to trust you again. The board is involved. I may lose my job. And I'm aghast. These are Peter's friends? You call that friendship? You call that win-win? You call that intimacy? I haven't been seen. Peter isn't seen. No one's giving either of us help. Both people need help in a traumatic event. But Peter's being terrorized. He's saying, I may have to move back to Australia, I may his whole life. And he's giving all this to me. The one person who doesn't need more weight. The only person who's getting it. His friends are not holding that. He doesn't even trust them enough to be talking with. Why isn't he on the phone to them? Oh my God, I may need to move back to New Zealand, the board. Why isn't he on the phone to the board? Why is he giving that to me? Because High doesn't know what it's doing there. It's not being loving to Peter in that moment. And Peter is not being loving to me. So without getting any support, without getting any validation, I start comforting Peter. I see what a desperate state he's in. I try and think what would comfort him. I said, you know, Peter, he said, you know, they think I took drugs with you. I said, no, I never said that. And they said, well, that's what they think. It's like, okay, well, there may have been some things that weren't clear. I'm trying to get this out. I had a traumatic event. I could not drive. You have not been talking with me for 6 months. I'm just trying to get some help here. I'm not asking this to be the final statement. I thought you were a loving community that cared for one another and that I would either be helped or a team member would be called. I mean, we don't just abandon people for 3 days at workshop in their worst crisis ever. We get help. I mean, what's the deal here? He said, oh, no, it's not how it works. So I tell Peter, well, I'm sure there's, inaccuracies. I didn't look at the dates and this and that and the other. He said, oh, please, could you say that? I said, fine. Peter's on the phone. I start my recorder. Hello, High facilitators. Peter's just said that rather than help, you're putting his job in jeopardy. You're meeting to discuss about it. Why are you meeting to discuss a job when you've got a participant in danger and in desperate crisis? This is fucked up. It's a joke. You don't want to be in crisis with the High facilitators in this state, period. And since they don't know what they're doing, you don't want to get into crisis with them, period. Do it at a workshop. They'll take care of you there. They won't abandon you in public. Do it there. Now, so I get on the thing with, and I say, facilitators, look, Peter has already listened to several hours of what I have to say. He's starting to get it, number one. Number two, he's one of the best facilitators. Number three, I am not interested in suing High. Number four, Peter is learning a lot from this. So if he was a good facilitator before this happened, he's going to be a better facilitator after it happens, assuming he keeps learning about all this. So if you think he's been a good facilitator for 10 years, and now he's learned all this stuff and made all these mistakes, you don't throw him out now. That doesn't make sense. That was a call, just as a little aside, to show contrast here. That was a call from my favorite hotel in Bangkok. I'm a very picky traveler with all this PTSD stuff, and so I interview usually 5 to 20 hotels, and then I pick one, and then I stick with it. And this hotel is phenomenal, and they're calling after I've stayed here 10 times or more, in which they've done everything they possibly can to attune themselves to my needs so that I feel very loved in this hotel. And they're calling anyway, without any reason, to know if there's anything they could do better. Am I fully satisfied? And I know these folks, and if I say no, I'm not fully satisfied, I didn't like this, this, and that, and the other, they'll say thank you so much. They will take notes. That will get escalated, and things will be done about it. Which is why I love giving them thousands of dollars. Which is why it's my favorite hotel. Which is why I'm so calm here. Calm enough to make a video, when plenty of hotels would have me in such a re-traumatized state with all the things that can be triggered as a sensitive person with repressed trauma, that I wouldn't be able to do it. And that's excellence. That's care. That's the top of the line of the business world. So FedEx is a good model in mission statements. We're a good model here in care and attunement. It's all about attunement. So I say, don't fire Peter. He's learning. And if he was a good facilitator before, the logic says he'll be a better facilitator now. That is the logic. How long is it going to take another facilitator to be as good as Peter? There's already fewer men than women because it's hard to find men who can not exploit people sexually as an American man or an Australian man in this environment. It's quite a discipline. Quite a discipline. Because of the wounds. Because they've got full of crap wounds that nobody wants to deal with, that nobody wants to understand. I have had more women tell me, I think it's about 300 right now, 300 women have told me men just want to have sex. Men are just interested in sex. They have told me that that's who I am. I didn't have sex by choice until I was 26. I stopped masturbating for an entire year just to save time, do more meditating. I don't pick people for sex. I don't pick people for bodies. This is not who I am. But I have been told by 300 women that that's who I am. And when I say, no, it's not who I am, they say, oh, don't worry about it. I understand. I understand. You don't have to defend yourself. I get it. That's who men are. You don't have to apologize. It's okay. I know you're just interested in sex. It's okay. It's like, okay, it's okay that you don't see me, that you don't want to see me, that you want to tell me who I am. And you don't want to hear that you don't see me. You don't want to see that you don't see me. You want to put me into your box. And I have no trouble acknowledging that you've had plenty of experiences. I have no trouble acknowledging the stereotype. But it gets to be a little strange when I'm told who I am by 300 women who don't even get that they don't get what they're talking about with me, who get into heated arguments when I try and educate them a little bit about me, who I am, and why. I don't like escalating a situation. So, back to the trauma piece. Someone with undiagnosed trauma, in my opinion, should not take psychedelics, number one. Number two, prior to taking psychedelics, I'd recommend 100 hours of Terence McKenna on YouTube, number one. Number two, I'd recommend Peter Levine's book, Healing Trauma. Number three, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, in these orders just because it's complicated. If you're like me, you can't read sometime when you need some distractions because you've got to manage your state. Listen on Audible, unabridged. And I recommend, highly. You can get Food for the Gods. The Body Keeps the Score. The Body Never Lies. When the Body Says No. And Healing Trauma, all unabridged on Audible. $50, miles ahead in what you need to know about yourself in this terrain. We are a traumatized culture. If we don't understand trauma, we are not safe in this culture, period. Oh, I don't have trauma, that's fine. Fine. You may be hit sideways by someone who does. Oh, I don't have AIDS. Fine. You may have sex with someone who does. You need to understand the dis-ease present in the culture, period. We've got at least 30% of our population in various states of undiagnosed trauma, period. We have a re-traumatizing world, period. It's getting worse, period. Give yourself and other people a break. Read the books. Learn what hardly any therapist is going to bother to show you. Study it and decide and learn. Read Acid Test, Food for the Gods, look online, Understand the projection aspects that go on with psychedelics too. 3, get a safe person. You want a safe person? Just pick the opposite of Peter Sandhill. I mean, that's when you've got terrible role models, like with my parents, my mother lying this and that and the other, I felt so much pain around that. I've just made a commitment. I've never lied to a friend or lover, period. It's that simple. You have unemotional denying this and that. I own my shit. Someone says I'm arrogant. Yeah, I know what you mean. You're self-centered. I know what you mean. You're controlling. Absolutely, I'm probably the most controlling person you're ever going to meet. You're juvenile and da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, I've got a lot of stuck ages in there, and this part needs this and this part, and my job is to love them. You're too direct. Well, it's probably good we don't interact because I believe in that, and you're absolutely right. I'm not going to pretend. I'm not going to drive people insane because the way I am is not something I'm comfortable enough with to own that I do these things. I'm not going to add the insanity weight. I'm not going to fuck people over and then tell them, by the way, could you just carry my lie also? Because I'm not strong enough to admit that that's me. So I want you to be abused by me and then pretend that I'm not being abused. Because I don't want to admit that I'm abusing you. Could you do that? No. Let's see. Okay, I understand that. That's hurt you. Absolutely. How much? 1 to 10? Okay. I'm really sorry. That's something I can't change right now. So, is that pain more intense than the value you're getting in this relationship? It is. Okay, we should separate, and I'm really sorry. How can I help you? Or, okay, that's going to keep happening. I'll minimize it. I want you to understand why. It's not about you. You deserve a lot more. You're not getting it. I'm sorry. I'm not going to add the insanity piece because that was the way my father hurt me the most. Psychological and physical torture is one thing. Staring you straight in the face. When my father died recently, I sent him a 45-minute recording outlining my love for him, my compassion for him, and the key areas that he had abused us and how and why all of us have varying degrees of suicidal tendencies, 5 beautiful, healthy kids turned into coping mechanisms by one man who didn't know what he was doing and shouldn't have been a father. Michael, you're going to have to face this one way or another. You're betting on an afterlife as much as I am. So clean it up now. Clean it up. Look at some of this crap. We've all seen it for years. Can you do that? Can you do it for yourself before you die? So that you don't have to go through the confusion of being invested in a lie that is ultimately ripped away from you. Because you can't grow until you see this. And when you do, you're going to see the way you were lied to and hurt in the same way. You've got to see this. I gave it to my brother to be with him as he listened to this recording. And my brother said it was very hard for him. It took my father a few days, and just before he died, he wrote me, "Thank you for your nice letter. I've loved you unconditionally from the day that you were born." In other words, I've made no mistakes. I can't apologize. I can do nothing wrong. I can't face any of it. I can't hear my impact. You're going to have to live with the insanity that your torture, that your misery, that your trauma is being rebranded and respun as unconditional love. So you can either take the poison pill and say, "My dad unconditionally loved me," and balm yourself with that delusion. Or you can be left with, "My father is so fucked up and so terrified that he can't even take off the last piece of insanity, because that would expose him to his remorse, to his pain, to his terror. And no one has helped him deal with that. No one has helped him deal with that. Everyone has been positive. Everyone has said, "Oh, you're not so bad. Oh, this, oh, that." Just, it's a fresh new day today. It's another fresh new day today. And after the abuse, it'll be another fresh day today. Let's all look the other way. Let's all hide. No one cared enough about him to confront him with this truth. So thousands of people have suffered because no one could take a stand for him. Thousands of people have suffered because no one could take a stand for me. Thousands of people have suffered because no one could take a stand for Peter Sandhill. No one could say, "You don't know what you're doing here. You can't help people until you diagnose. You can't diagnose without protocol. You can't do it all on feel-good. You can't say, 'This must be a good thing because it fits into my schedule. I have a great feeling about it.' That's not how bridges are built. It's not how heart transplants take place. It's not how love is built. It's not how love is given. It's messy. It's hard work. You want flowers, tend the soil. You want beauty, get your hands dirty in the manure of the earth. You don't need to fuss with flowers. You need to fuss with the soil. Flowers come naturally when the soil is rich and beautiful and the plant is happy. Flowers come naturally. And yet we are a culture that poisons the soil, that prunes the roots, that judges and despises what is dirty, that keeps the uninvited guest outside the wall and pampers and adores the flower, suffocating it with attention that it doesn't need and that does nothing at all. You can't fertilize a flower. You fertilize the soil. Don't focus on the child. Focus on the parent. Don't focus on the person. Focus on the environment. Change the soil, and the plant will grow. I'm in Thailand. I'm in Thailand because it's 300% more fertile soil. And the part that is purest soil for me is closer to the traditions. Women over 30 have not been swept up quite as much in the modern changes. There's more warmth, more flow. There's a group field, a little bit like the ayahuasca field in which people start sharing a certain group space. There's more of that present in Thailand. I love watching the dancing flows by which information, it's a bit like the internet, amongst 300 or 400 Thai workers together. It's like little bits of information. They all cooperate in this most amazing way. That's speaking of an organism that's bigger than the individual. It's beautiful to see. It's beautiful to see their joy and their happiness that comes from the mindset of we rather than the mindset of I. But you and I are in the West. You and I are Americans. So I'm trying to help you. What can you do in this situation? So help someone read, help someone take the test. Do not professionally facilitate someone breaking down boundaries before they know what they're dealing with. Make sure they understand trauma. So Peter didn't do that. He said he assumed I knew what I was doing, and he'd just show up and charge $175 an hour to do what I told him to do. And I told him to be normal and not resist things, just kind of facilitate that I trust myself largely in this degree. I pre-set up the container, so his first influence, asking me to increase my dose 300%, which amplifies my dependency, my boundary dissolving, my unknown, my risk, etc., by 300%. So that's his first influence. His second influence, the next time he asserted himself, was to suggest that I add MDMA. The third influence, add MDMA again. At that point I accepted his recommendation. His fourth assertion was that he was not blind, that all the seeing that I was doing in this channeling psychic kind of way out of my body state was not right about him. It was right about Sarah. He said, it's completely right. Everything you said about Sarah and all that. I knew all of that. Everything you say about me? No, that's not right. That's his next influence. His next influence is to escalate the romantic relationship, ask to kiss and lay on top of him. And his next influence is talking about past lifetimes. His next influence is when I say I really need help to integrate this. I mean, this is a big state. I've tracked it mentally. I know what's gone on. I'm in accord with this. But I'm going to need help over the next 9 months to integrate this. Will you help me? His next influence is to say nothing. Neither yes nor no. And I need boundaries. And he doesn't know that because he hasn't asked any questions. His next influence is to not show up for the appointment and precipitate a huge explosion as he's pushing me through my coping mechanism of containment and control. The fact that I can deal with all this suppressed energy and hold it, providing I have control of these things, that I can lean my certainty, my human need for certainty. I've not been able to find any safe people in my life, is what this is saying. I haven't found a single safe person where I can lean on them. And so I've got to lean on things. And I've put that certainty need on schedule, a good Western value, and things, a good materialist value. That's our culture. So I've put it there. He breaks the boundary. I have a fit. I've never had such a fit with a therapist, because he's just crashed my whole state by breaking that boundary. He's told me in 20 minutes that I am not safe with him. And at this point, I'm dependent on him. And I'm twice as dependent on him than I would have liked to be, because I've compromised and taken double the dose and the MDMA rather than just the one. And so I'm now needing him more. So if he'd broken the boundary at a normal dose, I could have coped and just said, you're not a good therapist for me. But I can't break the bond. As a result of doing the MDMA and the high dose, I've fallen in love in an unsafe way. I am not contained. My love is not contained safely in this relationship with Peter. But I don't know that yet. And I don't even know that MDMA is a judgment inhibitor. Turns out it is. I didn't read about that in acid test. I didn't know what I didn't know. Peter didn't know what I didn't know. Peter didn't know what he didn't know. There's so much knowing and not knowing, which is why this needs to be talked about. But the pattern doesn't want to be talked about. And anyone holding this pattern is tearing their hair out. You can't talk about this. You can't do this. The pattern doesn't want to be seen. Anyone holding the pattern, who's loyal to the pattern more than the people, doesn't want this to be talked about. We need people loyal to people, not patterns. We need to know who is a real ally as we break our patterns and who is not. Anyone who lies to us and discounts this is not an ally. They're protecting the pattern. Protecting the pattern. His next influence is to say he doesn't want to talk about our container, which is exactly what I need. On a first date or anything, and I've just fallen in love with this man, on a first date, I need to talk about what can I expect? Do you want to have another date or not? If you think about it, probably not good for me. I don't like that level of ambiguity. If you're not clear from this dose that this pattern repeating itself at higher doses is good for you, you probably don't have the awareness and certainty that I need to feel safe. So let's just make this the last date. Oh, I'm not clear about that. It's up to you. I'd like to leave this date clear about when and where we're going to engage next, or clear that we're disengaging. That's what I need to cope with the fact that I've placed my human foundation of certainty into schedule and things, because I can't place it in people, because I haven't had safe people. Take it or leave it. Okay, I'm not sure. See you later. Thank you. I bend for Peter. I've had this boundary dissolving experience. I see a great deal of beauty. Is it projection? Is it Peter's soul? Is it Peter's essence? Yes, yes, yes. And I don't like pushing people. The trouble is, I've hired someone hoping that they really did love enough to be of service, to attune themselves to me and my needs. And I don't have to push them, because this is the first fraying. I know what I need. I know what's good for me. I'm attached to Peter as a resource and as a source of hope. Hope that I will not need to kill myself, because I'll be able to answer the equation that there is some avenue that I can take that I haven't yet explored that is more positive than negative. That I will not have to look at my life every day and say, I am in more pain than well-being. And I don't believe that's going to change. And I do not want to live in that state. I don't believe in games that are predisposed to being lost. I don't believe in betting against the house. And I haven't been able to find a house on this planet where my spirit can win in a stable, statistically probable sense, and where my body can win rather than getting worse and worse. I haven't been able to find that. I haven't been able to find it in diet and therapy and high and this and that and the other. And I don't believe in playing games in which I lose and lose and lose and lose and am punished and shamed for losing and lose and lose and am punished and shamed and lose and do that alone. Because this is not the only game in town. Because I've been to other states, other realms, other dimensions, and other places where the game is not played by these rules. This is an anomaly in the multiverse, an unusual amount of pain for consciousness, not the best that's out there. And if I end this game and roll the die, where I end up next, and if I have any choice in the matter, I'm not going to pretend that I do because I don't remember making this choice, but if I do, I may not choose this existence again, in this or any time. Human existence is a travesty of ignorance and misery. Is it going anywhere? Can I help? Am I able to do anything useful without going insane and being persecuted? That's the big question, because if not, I don't want to be here. So I'm looking for that. I don't like controlling. I don't like pushing. I don't like win-lose. But Peter doesn't know how to serve. He doesn't know how to love. He doesn't want to serve. He doesn't want to love. And so he's using his influence. He's saying nothing to the 9 months. He's saying, let's talk about that later, and then later, and then later. His next influence, encouraging me to explore the relationship with Weepa. We saw where that went. Most painful relationship of my life, the most painful relationship of her life. She kept saying to me, you're the only person in my life who can make me feel this much pain, this anger, this rage, this much this, that, and the other. I just completely lose it around you. And I said, well, stop. No, I've never felt love before. I've never felt this and that and the other. It's like my guide is telling me this. You're in pain, because I'm telling her about all this hurt that I'm going through with Peter and stuff, and she wants to be there for me. Peter doesn't. She wants to be. But it's not healthy for her. It's not a good state. And I can't even get an honest answer out of her half the time. Because if I say, well, why don't you disengage? I really hear, I want you to do what's good for you. No, I want to do it. It's the confusion of Thai culture. So Peter's used influence there. His next influence is he's continuing the thing with Weepa. That's going on for several months. That's an influence. I see, and I take a stand for what I see, that this is the brightest thing you can do in your future. I'm happy to talk about this, but I'm not happy to talk about this. That's an influence. It's shunting attention away from the conversation that needs to happen for my well-being and my safety, to the conversation that avoids what needs to happen so that Peter can remain invisible. That's his next weight. Next, I give him several gifts, and he complains about the gifts. He said his biggest problem is money and time. I did some channeling and stuff. I gave him a meditation to create time and to create money. I was really excited about it. I gave it to him, no response. A week goes by. I said, Peter, did you enjoy the meditation, the gifts? He said, no. I said, I'd love to hear, because I'm exploring this new field that I've opened up. You know, I've channeled and stuff. I want to see if this is any good. I want to know, is it working? I mean, is this just nonsense or is it good? Like, tell me, how's it going? No, not listen to it. So his next influence is to discount the value of my gifts. Then he gets snooty about it. Stop asking me about the gifts. You've ruined it now. You've ruined it. That's not a gift. You want to know how I liked it. Well, I haven't been bothered to listen to it. I don't know when I'm going to listen to it. But stop asking me. That's not a gift. This doesn't feel like a gift to me. I say, I really want to know. You know, you're one of the few people who I can talk to about this. I want to know. He never listened to it, but he said I'd ruined it. So that's his next influence. Discount the gift. Suppress what wants to be born. Now he's dividing me because he's hurting me. Now he's dividing the lover and the creator and the one who wants to please him and what's good for me. That's not the healer you want. Next influence, ignoring my emails. Peter, could you talk more? You're not telling me hardly anything. I can't engage with you if you're just silent and not volunteering anything. How are you doing? Put things into words, please. Next influence, silence. Next influence, could you wait another couple of months? It starts feeling wonky. His next influence, I say this doesn't feel good. I'm getting pictures of rotting meat and stuff in my mind. I do a meditation. I get the sense that you're in martyrhood around this. That you're blocking our love and stuff with your martyrhood and confusion. That's the best I can get. Can you give me some sense what's on your end? He said, no, none of that. I'm certainly not in martyrhood, and I'm insulted. I'm insulted that you would insinuate anything. So next influence, block anything that I see. Block it. Not offer an alternative, not say let's get together, not check in, not help me see him, not see me. Block it. We're doing the opposite of that 9-month integration process. The absolute opposite. I ask for integration, he controls all communication. Just stops responding to email. I ask him to take money out of the relationship, which seems entirely appropriate in retrospect since he's just hurting me and doesn't know what he's doing, since he can't maintain boundaries, since he doesn't have a healing protocol, since he's out of integrity with absolutely everyone in the entire event. He refuses. That's his next influence, to say no, to keep money in. So in order to get engaged with the one person who's witnessed this most amazing experience in my life, I've got to play by unhealthy rules in an unhealthy controlled communication dynamic with someone who's scared and not healthy but doesn't know enough to know that or admit it, who's making me feel crazy every time I open my mouth, and whose only request is don't see me and don't let me see you. That's pretty much what it all boils down to. Don't give to me, don't see me, don't let me see you. And then when I ask Peter, with my next influence, could we talk about this? No. Do you have any boundaries you're not telling me about? No. So I can write to you, anything? Yeah. No boundaries? No. Bye. So I write to him that afternoon, just ignores the emails. That's his next influence. His next influence is to discount that there's anything to apologize for. And he's getting tighter. His energy is getting tighter. I know I'm not welcome here. So his next influence is, Dane, you are not welcome here. So he's like that proverbial woman in the cuddle party bar who, can I buy you a drink? Maybe later. Can I buy you a drink? Maybe later. Can you buy me a drink? Maybe later. I said maybe later. Don't you get it? Maybe later means never. Well, why don't you just say never? Why should I? Why should I say what I mean? I said maybe later. Isn't that what we say in this culture when we mean never? And so, there's this dance going on here. His next influence is to tell me I'm not doing my work, that it's a completely imbalanced relationship and we should wait another couple of months before we even resolve. No resolution, no talking. I feel like I'm going insane by this point. I pay him for 2 resolution things in which he doesn't open up honor. He doesn't thank me for paying him to close. He doesn't acknowledge the pain that I'm in about paying him at all. Since I believe in doing our best guidance, and that was that money shouldn't be in this relationship. But I also know I learn by talking. I need to integrate. This is an amazing experience to integrate, and he's blocking it. How can I integrate without him? I do diary. I re-listen to the 10-hour recording multiple times. I send him the 10-hour recording. He ignores it. He says, thanks, I'll listen to it, and he never does. So broken commitment. And his next influence is ignoring me when things start erupting in crisis. So at this point, in his mind and in his presentation, he has gone way over what he agreed to. He's been so helpful with my relationship with Wipa. He's bent over backwards to help that relationship. And the fact that it didn't work out was my fault. The fact that I need more time is my fault. The fact that I want to actually talk about the conversation he's delayed for 4 months is me not getting it, that I should be getting that. Let's talk about that later. Let's talk about that in 2 months. Let's talk about that in 2 months. What do you mean you want to talk about this? I'm really busy. Well, I wanted to talk and get clear about where we stood on day 1. That's my style. I've bent to your style and delayed this for 4 fucking months. I've never done that for anyone. I'm trying to explore this new me. And you're shitting on it every step of the way. You don't want the gifts, you don't want this isn't good enough. That's what you complained about, the giving of the meditations. So I made you a beautiful card, custom art, sent it to you, and I never asked you about it, not once. I figured, let's see how it happens Peter's way. He says he loves the gifts, but it's ruined for him that I asked him too soon about how it was. That's just ruined the whole gift for him. And of course, this is all about Peter. I'm paying Peter $175 an hour to do the relationship that's good for Peter, not the relationship that's good for me. Let's get this straight. And so, of course, I should be adapting, and so I do, as the good client does with a sick therapist. So I make him this card, and he never responds. So it's like, okay, so the time for you to respond is never. The time for me is within 3 days of receiving a gift, or right open the time, an enthusiastic receptivity, and oh, that's an amazing thing. Thank you so much. I told you my big problems. Me, the therapist, charging you money to tell you about my problems again. You made me a gift. You didn't charge me. Something a little imbalanced there. You didn't charge me, but I'm not interested. And you're supposed to give me gifts in the way I like to receive gifts, not the way you like to receive gifts, not the way you like to give gifts. You're just my client, who I'm fucking up and using every step of the way. That's the influence thread until we get to you talking, and then his influence is, you've betrayed me. Then his influence is to give me all of his new problems and have me fix them with the facilitators. Then his influence is to ignore me again. I ask him to be a humble student. I say, Peter, if you can adopt a posture of profound humility and just listen and help me talk through this. I learn best through sorting through this. There's a lot you don't know. There's a lot you don't know, despite pretending you see everything. Could you just listen? That would really help me. He does, and it really helps. I say, when can we continue? He says, well, I can't do it tomorrow. I've got to go meet with the facilitators about my job. So his job and the facilitators come before me in a state of crisis. Next influence of the facilitators and Peter. I say, could we talk on the way to your facilitator meeting? He says, no. I've got to do a car ride with Felicia and and she might not want to talk. So Felicia comes ahead of me and my needs in gross negligence situation that's delayed for 6 months in a traumatic state. Felicia comes ahead of me. Got to have a meeting. The meeting comes ahead of me. I said, how about on the way home? He said, oh, okay. Calls in the back home. I said, Peter, I just want to let you know, I'm reacting to the fact that I've been shunted aside and I'm having to push. I asked you if you could adopt a state of listening and responding to me. You said you would, and I've been fighting you all day. I can't do this because of this, I can't do this because of this, and none of that has anything to do with me. And part of what I'm trying to teach you is your client comes first. That someone that you've hurt, you have an ethical and moral, you have no ethical and moral responsibility to pick Felicia up in a car ride. You have no ethical responsibility to go to a high facilitator meeting before your client's crisis is mended. Is this about you again? Or is this actually about clearing up your mess? Who is important? Well, of course, I've got to do this with that. And you've just got to fit through the cracks of my life as usual. I've got my piano license, my holidays, my this, my that. You've got to fit through the cracks because you're not important. You're just a mere client who trusted me that I knew what I was doing with the most significant experience of your lifetime to date, with the biggest risk you've ever taken. That's all you are. And I've got important things to do. And he interrupts. And he says, no, I am listening. I am putting you first. I said, Peter, you're not listening right now. This is not first. Yes, it is. I said, Peter, you think you're adopting a humble state that I asked in which you don't know what you don't know? Yes. And I'm telling you, you're not. And you're wrong. Sarah's been listening to this, and Sarah says you're wrong also. She says you're being unreasonable. Aha. So Sarah, who has not even acknowledged my recording, who has not come to my help, who has not apologized for not intervening 10 years ago, who has not checked in to see how I'm doing, who has not stepped up to hold me or listen to me along with any of the facilitators, is stepping up to tell me that I'm wrong. Yeah, I see. And this is your idea of learning what you don't know, you don't know. Yeah. Well, it's not. You are not listening. Yes, I am. How are you listening that you're not listening if you're arguing with me? So this was the break. This broke the thread. Next, Peter, having come from this meeting, refuses to talk because he says, he doesn't tell me, But he just says, I want to have another facilitator on board. I said, fine, get him. They said, they're busy. So now we can't talk because in their secret meeting that I wasn't invited to and wasn't included in, they've decided that Peter can't talk with me without another facilitator. But they haven't made any facilitator time. So Peter gets on the phone. Felicia can do an hour at this point. Donna can do 20 minutes at this point. I asked for 8 hours as soon as possible. We get an hour, we get 20 minutes. In a protocol I wasn't included in, there's no asking what I need, there's no attunement, will this work? This is an imposed, controlled communication protocol, which continues the pattern of Peter's imposed nonsensical communication protocol, which is ignoring my emails and ignoring my requests that he clarify his ignoring and pretending that he's not ignoring and saying there's no boundaries, when how do you communicate if someone doesn't respond? And I just feel this is so sad. I'm feeling enormously sad, enormously irritated, because Peter is a competent, smart man. He is not behaving intelligently, kindly, or rationally, but nor is he admitting it. He's asking me to pretend. He's hurting me. He's asking me to pretend that he's not hurting me because he's not big enough to see that he's hurting me. And none of the other facilitators are doing anything about that either. And once Peter's job is secure, he's got no more humility. When I took a stand and said, don't fire Peter, I'm not planning on suing, Peter's kindness and humility dried up in 24 hours. And from that point on, I had to fight. And this is the second ripping apart of the individual. Because now there's the lover-pleaser, the one that wants to be kind and accommodate, the paid therapist yet again, with the part that knows what I need and knows that I have been neglected in that need for 40 years. And I've trusted a paid professional to help. And I've been hurt. And I've trusted again, and I'm getting hurt again. And now I'm being blamed for it all. Never going to trust you again for this lifetime. And Felicia's time comes along, and I say, Felicia, since it's only an hour, I'd like to take charge of this hour and use it the way I need it. She says, no, I'm going to facilitate. I said, I'd like you not to facilitate, Felicia. I'd like to take control of this time. She says, no, I'm going to. I say, okay, Felicia, what do you got in mind? She says, we're going to give half of it to Peter and half of it to you. I says, well, I guess, do it. What does Peter say? Peter uses his half hour to vent his rage, his fear, his rage, his panic. I do not want you as my teacher. I do not want you as my student. I do not want you in my life. This was a sacred moment. I've talked with my energy worker about this, and it's your job to extract from this situation. Whatever it is, you can extract. I will extract from this situation whatever I can extract. And that's the way it's supposed to be. You are violating my energetic space. So he's talking to Sarah. I'm wrong. He's talking to his energy worker. I'm wrong, of course. He's telling me all the ways I am not welcome. I asked for him to humbly learn. Not going to happen. Now that he's secure in his righteous thing, now that he's been bolstered by his sick facilitators, who are more concerned with their own political and stuff than they are about me. Not one person is contacting me to respond for help or gather information. They don't want to see How do you respond when you want intimacy, when you want to know what's going on? You talk with the person who brings up the issue. Do you want a world where when a rape victim calls the police and says, I've been raped, they say, we know that guy. Let's get him in here and talk to him. That doesn't sound like him. And we don't want to waste our time with this rape victim. He's one of our friends. Let's get him in here. Let's talk, come on, let's get you some support. You'll get over this. We're not going to fire you, da-da-da-da-da. We're going to keep you away from that guy. And, okay, we'll get through this. Now, we're going to develop this plan. We're going to protect you here. We're going to get you through this. Peter said it was basically a protection meeting for him. I really appreciate Peter's innocence in this as well. He is not a bad man. He is an incompetent man because he has not been trained, including a training about where he hasn't been trained. And he came in with some imbalances that he's medicating. He loves the fix. He loves the rush. He loves the speed. And I really appreciate that Peter has not gone out of his way to hide the dis-ease. He's done what he believes in to the best of his ability. And it's hurt me a lot. But at least he hasn't hid the pattern unnecessarily. So he told me. He said, yeah, they wanted to make sure I was okay. They're worried about this and that and the other. No concern about me? Yeah, that wasn't really our focus. Bless him for being candid. Bless Anne for her candor at different points. So they're using their influence to control communication in a way that blocks my needs. Felicia is using her influence. She's portraying this as a lover's spat, even though Peter's broken agreements by escalating the romantic relationship within the high framework. So in a lover's spat, if she's the therapist, Peter's the man, I'm the woman, I'm the more feminine energy in the dynamic. Peter's the man, I'm the woman. So Peter, what do you have to say? Well, I hate that, I'm not going to do this and that. And Dane, what do you have to say? I feel I do want to recommend, Peter's obviously furious. This is the first time he's actually spoken. He's hidden, but I hear it. I trust that he is furious and hastened. I'm not trying to trap Peter in a relationship. Well, good, you did. But I have a problem of my own, believe it or not. As I mentioned, as you've all ignored, had an eruption while driving. I can't count on myself to drive safely. I don't know what Peter has been doing the opposite of what I need for 6 months now, and it has gotten explosive. It is miserably painful. I'm in complete dark because Peter has blinded me with one obfuscation technique after another at such a dizzying and charming rate that I haven't known what's hit me. And I'm in pain, I'm disoriented, I'm not integrated, and I haven't gotten help that I needed, and I was in a suicidal state to begin with. Well, can you agree that Peter has his right to disengage, and that Sarah has the right to have her husband back, and that this? Sure they do. But can we agree that I, as a client, who've paid money over decades to people who said they love me and have some right in this thing? Well, okay. Peter grudgingly acknowledged that I had some rights. He was quite pissed at that time. I had some rights. Amazing. This was big progress, having been paying him to do things the way he wanted to do them for some time. So that was that influence. And I felt pushed back. I felt completely numb. I felt completely rejected, completely unwanted, a complete repaying and a replaying of the wound that I had been so audacious to talk to a responsible adult, to tell someone about my parents' abuse, and had been pushed back in my place again and again and again. And now I was being pushed back in my place again, patronized. I'm just here, Felicia, I'm just here because I love you. Patronized. This is not a high issue. No. But I care about you and Peter. You asked for a good closure, and I'm going to see that you get it. You want 4 hours? Fine. We're going to pick a time where you can have 4 hours with Peter, and then we're going to be done with this. But in that whole hour, I went through one disorienting dissociation after another. My lover was trashed and rejected. My teacher was completely unwelcome. Peter didn't want to learn a thing out of this, nor did I. I mean, there's no difference. It's not a high issue, it's not a Peter issue. No one's going to learn anything. The basis that I need someone to dialogue with in this terrain to integrate, completely trashed. Why? I don't care. What I need and what I know about myself and 30 years of dialoguing and writing and working with people, that doesn't matter because Peter has an energy worker who's told him that it doesn't matter. How convenient. I'm being ganged up on by Felicia, Sarah, and Peter, and everyone else, and his energy worker. And everyone else is saying, this is an high issue. And everyone else is saying, we're not going to help. Next comes Anne. I have been chosen. We're too busy to deal with this as a group. I have been chosen. I will report back to the group. That doesn't work for me. I don't trust any of you, and I wanted a circle. This is too big. I can't see what's going on. I've been kept in the dark with Peter for too long. I need to see with my own eyes. I need proximity. Well, this is just how we're going to do it. You're not included in the decision. You're not included in the protocol. What you need doesn't matter. What we need, that matters. And so that's how it's going down. Take it or leave it. Now, every one of these things that diverges from me divides me between my loyalty. Anne has been my therapist. She's taken a stand in various ways. She's loved me in the best of her ability in various ways. I don't want to hurt Anne. I don't want to fight Anne. I don't want to confront Anne. I don't want to argue with Anne. And yet she has been designated as the face of a sociopathic pattern that is not attuned to me, to what I need, or to what's going on. That is not empowering me, that is disempowering, that is amplifying the trauma that I'm experiencing in those days. So it's going up and up and up. They're completely ignoring my emails, and I'm telling them I am freaked out because I have never felt so much pain in my entire life. My body is aching in places of my brain I didn't know were there. There's this pit in the back of my head where it feels like a vacuum appears and there's salt in it. And it's like, this is dangerous. I don't know if I'm on the edge of a breakdown, a collapse, because I can't lift my head up when this happens too much. And they are just hitting that part over and over and over, and no one's attuned to it. And they're all pushing against me. 9 people, my role models, the leaders of my community, all telling me they love me, all telling me they are going to sort it out, but it's getting worse and worse and worse. And in order to fight this, I've got to split myself in half, because one part is completely loyal to them, and another completely, this is completely fucked up. So I've got to divide, and I've got to decide which one in me I'm going to go to, because they're not allowing me to integrate. They are not behaving ethically and intelligently in a way that I can be loyal and self-loving at the same time. So I've got to divide myself, and I'm split in half. Now I've got a new wave of pain and loneliness. And I'm being treated like the enemy. I'm not being trusted. I'm not being included. I'm not being cared for. I'm not being attuned to. And this goes on and on and on and on. Peter disappears again. I write him several emails in those next few days. He just ignores them. I'm busily trying to cope. If I meet with Peter based on how he's behaving, is it going to get worse or is it going to get better? Because I feel right on the edge, like I don't know if I can deal with it. I don't know. I know that Thailand is the safest place I can possibly go. And I've already broken up with Wipa, but I have no one. I have no one who is safe to enter into this void. It's on the surface. When you have trauma, you don't get to pick. Oh, I think I'll hide this from this person. I'll just be on the surface here. You don't get to pick that. It's on the surface for everyone. So really the choice is isolation or a safe person. Well, my safety net has just been ripped off. I'm completely isolated. But I'm isolated at the very time I need love the most. At the very time I need at least one person I can trust. And that's just been shattered and shattered and shattered and shattered. What can I do? What can I do? I don't know. I want to get to Thailand. Peter's saying, maybe I can meet you next Sunday. I don't know if I can make it through. I don't know, is it going to be better or not? He's continually saying, this is inconvenient. I don't want to be inconvenient. I don't want to be in the most pain I've ever been in and be inconvenient. Be an unwelcome guest. Because I actually expected what was promised. Love, health, communication, intimacy, honesty. I don't want to be an inconvenience, but I am. And I know it, and that hurts more than anything. Most of the forces lined up in this whole process. So what Hai does is it then basically continues Peter's protocol, which is where he learned it, I would assume. Only with 9 people against me and my whole community at stake. When I contacted the facilitators, I felt sure they love Peter and me. They'll help this out. They'll circle around. They'll hold me. I'll calm down. They'll get it. Peter will learn. Life will go on and the community will be stronger. I never dreamed they would gang up against me and I would lose my entire community because I spoke out. I never dreamed that I would be made the enemy because I revealed Peter's shortcomings to his peers, his board, his organization, to his friends. I never dreamed I would need to rescue him from that or be made the further burden of yet more problems, though I should be expecting that by now since I've been asked to hold Peter's burdens in various forms, since the first session. This created, there's one part of me knowing this, and there's another part that's dealing with these physical symptoms, these emotional symptoms, and it's like, what is the most loving thing that I can do for me? And I don't know. It's certainly not to shout at Anne. But I feel deeply hurt that she's been made the face of the sociopathic pattern that is hurting me. And she was one of my resources before, which means she's lost. Which means that the lawyerly Anne that came on and wasn't sure about this and that took time to meet and this and that, and could you get the recording up, and if it was like this, finally, when Anne heard the recording, she said, "You are not safe with that man." But the same Anne said, "You should be paying for my time." See, the trouble is, what's happening is the same thing. In the first pattern, so remember, my parents pushed all the children into a state that was so desperate that they needed to cope, and then didn't allow healthy coping mechanisms based on trust and this and that. It required a range of extreme coping mechanisms. Then it shamed them for the coping mechanisms. Then it did that so often that the coping mechanism became the adaptive identity. Then it shamed them for the identity, and then it said, "This is who you are." And they said, "This is who I am because I've never known anyone else. The times I took care of them were too few." And this is the most evil possible thing that we can do to a human being who could and would have so happily been so much more and so willingly. You have to work hard, really hard and intensely to hurt someone like that. It's only easy because it's in the morphogenic field, but the actual energy expenditure to not attune, to push someone back, to not repair, to blame them, to shame them, this is all painful, hard work. To just love and hold someone, to attune and listen, it's easy. It's joyful. Relative to replaying the pattern. It takes more units of energy to abuse someone than to love them, is what I'm basically saying. Once you've associated trauma with loving someone, so that to love someone you got to face trauma, then it flips around. But only then. Only then. On a pure physics level, it takes less energy to love, be kind, and attune, and avoid all the problems that come from abusing than it does to abuse, which is part of the joke. Because while it didn't get so severe in the first session, Peter pushed into pain, shamed me for the coping mechanism that I used to extricate myself, and then left me and charged me. In the second situation, I'm asking for help again. He's systematically blocking everything that I need in the way of support and simultaneously using his influence to push me in the opposite direction of what's good for me. And then he's telling the pleaser in me that has fallen in love with him in that mushroom MDMA state. He's telling that part of me, if you could just give me another couple of months, which is exactly the most toxic thing you could possibly ask for. If you could just do that, I'd really appreciate it. And so what he's doing is he's splitting and turning the self on the self in a way that destroys the well-being that's trying to come through, that he is in an ethical, moral position to want to do. He is destroying that. And the more I act out, I think he pulled back when I was so furious when he broke the first protocol of being 20 minutes late without any communication. I think it scared him. And he blamed me. He didn't blame himself. He didn't say, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm really sorry. Gosh, there's probably a lot that I can learn here. Tell me how you're built. I came into this very fast. I haven't done intake. So much I don't know about you. No, he just started putting up walls which were further the opposite of what I needed. And so he's used the influence to push me into dangerous terrain, the most toxic and dangerous terrain he possibly can. Then he's hidden it, which makes it more dangerous. And then as I explode, he's blaming and shaming me. He's blaming and shaming me for talking about it. He's blaming and shaming me for persisting. He's rejecting. He's criticizing. And then he's saying that he's the betrayed one, that I talk to his peers about this, when I have no help. So it's like paint someone in the corner that they have to divide themselves because I'm not going to let them integrate. So now I have to split from my biggest source of support. I have to betray him because he's betrayed himself and me. And he's going to let it go on indefinitely. Look at the first 10-year pattern. Imagine if he only kissed and asked me to lay on top of him when he was not taking a single drug. Imagine what would have happened. What would he have done if I'd paid him $600 10 years ago? And he'd taken the drug. He said he wanted to take it and I wanted to take it, and he would supply it. He'd be in an absolute fuckhole because he would have supplied an illegal drug, taken an illegal drug, sexually molested a virginal man, and lost it far more than he lost it just because I was on drugs. And that was a Peter 10 years ago. That was a Peter who had less skill than the Peter today. And if he blamed me and shamed me now, imagine then. If he woke up and realized, oh my gosh, my career high and all that are on the line, and I didn't have it recorded, I'd have been sold down. I might be dead. I might be dead because Peter cannot be relied upon to take a stand and understand his role, the sacredness of his role as being a safe space for someone in a traumatic state who has desperate need of help when they've been betrayed throughout the whole culture. That is wrong. And it's wrong that I'm $20,000 in debt rather than $89,000 in savings. It's wrong that Peter has not offered a refund. It's wrong that High is pretending this has nothing to do with it. Jason finally, after the fuses were all burnt out, Jason said, I think we've made a mistake here and I should probably meet with you. But this is the Jason that refused to do anything that cost a penny. He refused to do therapy. I asked them to hire a therapist. I said, you guys need help. I don't feel safe dealing with you alone. Please get a therapist and have them mediate this. Ignored. So he's just doing the ignoring thing that Peter's doing. Ignored. Can you at least apologize for this? Ignored. I'm not sure I'm going to come away feeling better with a meeting with that man in that state of ignorance, because the final burden of shame and indignity and insanity of this whole thing is they so don't know what they're doing that if I don't teach them, they just go away doing it again. Anne said, why do you care? This is not your issue. I said, this is not personal to me. I'm not going to let someone else be treated like this. This is how you behave in this situation, as evidenced by your behavior, your emails, your recordings, your actions and your inactions, and it's destructive. It's not personal, I agree. But I've been hurt by this more than I've ever been hurt in my adult life, and by people I trusted to protect me and know what they're doing. That's not right. I said, Anne, what makes sense to me is not that I pay you to coach Peter because he can't apologize on his own, because he can't keep giving me shame dumps, that I pay you. What's right is that Peter do whatever it takes to restore my well-being to at least the level it was before this happened. Because it is wrong for High or Peter to be paid to hurt an individual, to not know what they're doing, to not get that person help, and then leave them in a worse state. That is wrong. And it's wrong for them to be made a dirty secret so that that doesn't have to be dealt with. That's wrong. I said, for an organization committed to love intimacy, and sexuality, there's only one solution: learning, owning, and having a positive ending to this. There's only one solution. Peter had a different idea. He said, I've talked with my lawyer because I wanted to know where I stand about this, and here's what they told me should be done here. You remember the South African tribunals where all the black people shared their grievance and then the white people were forgiven? That's what needs to happen here. We need to have a forgiveness ritual, and you need to tell me your grief, and then that's the end of it. Well, that's a wonderful, self-serving thing for you, but Peter, if you haven't noticed, that's part of the problem. It's not about you. When you're of service, it's about the other person. It's about what feels good to them. It's about what's loving to them. It's about what's balancing and medicinal to them, not about you. How about, rather than making all these controlled protocols and it's going to be this way and this way and this way, how about you ask, what do you need for once? And stop griping and moaning about doing it and telling how unreasonable it is, how you've only got, you can't just spend all day. I mean, you've just spent $16,000 painting your office. You just talked about your client that pays you $900 an hour to consult with. Just talked about all the stuff that you're doing. We can't burden Peter with another $2,000 to save the sanity, the integrity, the dignity of someone who's in a terrible state because of an incredible level of ignorance and incompetence. We can't do that. This is a message of profound self-loathing. Every single thing Peter said has impact. And I've found myself in a repeat of the first pattern at a much bigger level, feeling more violent, more enraged, more filled with insanity, hurt, hate, and physical pain than I've ever felt in my life. Being the person I least liked being more than any time in my entire life. And then being blamed and shamed for that. Peter stepping back there and saying, well, I don't want to listen to that, you're talking too much, this and that. It's like, Peter, I don't want to be talking with you. I don't want to be teaching you. I do not want to be doing all the therapies I'm doing to clean up your act. I didn't want to go to the facilitators. I don't want to be dumped and controlled by the facilitators. I wanted you to actually care enough to listen to what I needed and be of service or get me help if you couldn't without shaming me. I wanted you to take responsibility that when someone loves you, your influence has even more impact. I wanted a real adult that, if you see that if I tell you I'm having the most abusive relationship of my life, you're sure this is the best thing that you say, well, it doesn't matter what I'm seeing. You're being abused. You're being hurt. Weepa's getting hurt. Get out of there. I don't care about what I see. I care about your well-being. That's what I want. I actually told Peter, take money out. Imagine if he'd just done this as a gift and bumbled around and made all these mistakes as a humble human being, just trying to be helpful. He said he thought about it, but decided not to. Just like he said, Jason's over at my house, and Jason thought about, wouldn't it be nice if we could just go and love Dane and hold him like he asked and things would improve? Wouldn't that be nice? If I could do that and it would work, I would do it in a heartbeat. Well, I asked for it, and no one did it. And then I'm being given all of these little teasers. Like, we would do it if we thought it would help. But we're not going to do it. We're not going to invite you. We're not going to ask what you need. So we're all over here grouping, buddy-buddy. We're crying together about the situation and all that. You're alone, laying in bed with a head filled with salt and aching and stuff like that. But we're thinking about you over here. You're not included. We're not going to invite you. We're not going to extend. We're just going to say, if. Peter says, Jason told me that if it would help, he'd go over there. I said, yeah, Peter, But I asked Jason and everyone else to do that. No one did it. And Jason ignores my emails. So it doesn't really matter that you're all over there enjoying yourself, again, saying that Jason would do this if he thought it would help. So he doesn't think it's helped, so he doesn't do it. And so it's just this little sting. It's probably my fault, isn't it? Because I wouldn't be helped, would I? It's just explosively bizarre. I want to talk about the biggest wound that kind of comes at the end. The biggest wound that comes at the end of all this is it's so big. It's been wrapped in so many layers of shame, silence, complexity, and nuance that almost no one can understand it. And what does that mean? It means that I am alone. There is not a single human being, unless you've made it all this way in this video, that has seen and understood and validated all of this. And the cumulative impact, not the this, not the that, not the little bit. See, our minds can hold about 7 things at one time and then they lose it. When we're in a culture that's overloaded with information and stimulation, there are very few minds that can listen to this. And I could pay another therapist $2,000 to listen to all of this, with a 1/3 chance that it would make it even, with a 1/3 chance it would make it better, with a 1/3 chance that they would shame, defend, question, let me know in some way that whether they understood my experience or not, they disagreed with it. They thought I should be more positive, more this. They didn't want to see what was there or how that reflected my environment. Maybe they were defensive. I don't like the Western therapeutic protocol, having gone through this and looked at it, and more importantly, discovered over the last 9 months what works the most, which is when you are in early childhood attachment dynamics, in profound shame and trauma, and lack regulating skills because you've never had those taught on an empathic level. When you're flooded and carrying other people's wounds they won't own, being with one individual who's kind, feminine, nurturing, and has no agenda, 24/7, is very, very healing. Who's kind, who's loving, who's gentle, who will receive love. It's absolutely beautiful. Some people will not like the fact that I didn't know a single person in the United States that I could have that experience with. Therapists may not like hearing that going into trauma around early attachment things and then severing and pausing artificially, sociopathically, not attuned to the individual but attuned to the therapist's schedule, is sometimes destructive. That there's some terrain where therapeutic protocol within the West is actually toxic to the core pain that is being dealt with, which is that feminine energy is not attuning to the individual and the emotional state present, but rather that a wound is asked repeatedly to accommodate what is good for the source of feminine energy, and there's a conflict. My mother didn't want to be a mother. Pretty big conflict if you're going to have 5 children. Pretty big conflict. Once you make that choice to not wear a condom, whatever, you're screwed, but so is the child. My therapist didn't want to be with my pain in the way that needed to be dealt with, regardless of anything else. My therapist wanted me to fit in their box. My mother wanted me to fit in her box. Since you had to have children, at least fit them in the box. You need this outside the box? Yeah, I'm not really into that. Just fit in there. If it doesn't work, scream, cry. I'll go to another part of the house. I don't want to hear you. The hour isn't enough for you? Maybe we could try 90 minutes in another 2 weeks. That doesn't work? You want to bond more right now? You want to hold someone's hand? Yeah, I don't want to do that. Has nothing to do with the wound or what's needed, and everything to do with a therapist referencing their books or referencing their schedule or referencing their tolerance. And they're raised in the West. They're dealing with the same patterns. So therapists don't like hearing this. But the biggest irksome thing about this dynamic, and I experienced this when I had constellation therapy with the deity. Constellation therapy is where another person or group of people within a protocol basically channels other people and presences so that you can have the experience of safely processing what the personality of that person will block. The body doesn't lie, basically. And so, and people who are playing another person don't have the agenda of hiding. Like you and I, if we like to think of ourselves as cheerful, cool, upper people, you know, I can put this vibe out and everything's great and made more another 1,000 today. I'm gonna go and do this at the gym and da-da-da-da-da. You and I might be invested in pretending we're not depressed, as an example. No, stuff's good. But in constellation therapy, if someone's asked to play Dane, that person immediately notices changes in their body, and that person is not invested in making Dane look cool. He's not invested in making Dane look bad. He doesn't even know who Dane is. He just notices, my body feels so heavy, I don't want to look in this direction. I feel like I want to look at you, but I'm scared of being punished. And you get to relate to people without their egos fucking it up, basically, and trying to perform the social mask. That's the potency of constellation therapy. It also gets to that Greek issue of the Medusan mask, in which the thing is looked at indirectly, symbolically, and not head on. I don't, if I'm dealing with Peter or someone in high, through this mask of constellation therapy, I'm not afraid of Peter shaming and defending, because the therapist or the person playing Peter isn't trying to hide what's going on. But I am afraid, I'm quite afraid of bringing certain pains and griefs that are present around all of this to the high facilitators, because I've come to expect being punished for being the messenger. And I don't want to be punished again for being punished for being punished. I don't want to have paid to be punished, and then be punished for talking about it. I want acknowledgement, growth, and support. I want learning. I want ownership. I want them to get the support they need to occupy the role they advertise as being a safe space to do this work. And I want them to take as much responsibility for their impact as they coach thousands of people to take for their impact. I want them to get off their fucking pedestal and apologize for their mistakes, and I want their primary commitment to stop being about themselves and to be of service. And if they can't do that, to get the help to where they could. And if they can't do that, just say, I can't be of service here. I'm really sorry. I'm a human being. I've got lots of stuff around this. I see it. That's not your issue. In this area, I need to be a human being. I can't be a therapist. I can't be a leader. I can't be a high facilitator. It hurts too much. It's too raw. I'm just a person. Get some help from someone who can help you, and I'll at least help with that. That didn't happen, by the way. I asked Peter, who was telling me about all the help he was getting. He'd got enough sex. He'd got enough thing. He was talking with his Rick, his household mate. He was found a good somatic therapist. I said, Peter, I have no one. My trust in therapists has been fucked over so much, it's really hard. The way I need to work with someone is really sensitive. I would love a somatic healer to come to my house somewhere after 7 p.m. on any night and help in this way in 2 or more hour sessions. Can you get that for me? I'm so tired and it hurts so much to be rejected at this point. It's playing the wound over and over. He said he'll see what he can do. He said he contacted a few people, nothing. So, tough. He's got it, I don't. Isn't it great when your abuser is getting well? It is. But I'm just astounded at how little emphasis was placed on a client, a participant, a human being who trusted this organization to be safe and healthy, and who had gotten hurt as a result of that trust. There's no question of intention. It's a question of impact and skill and responsibility. And to hurt someone for being hurt and to hide them and make them a secret, that's not healthy. That's not loving. It's not what I needed. I'd had secrets all my life. I didn't need to be a new secret. I didn't need to carry anyone else's. The most painful part of all of this is realizing that this web, this pattern, is so intricate and big and repeated so many times that there may never be a human being who understands. There may never be a human being who says, Dane, I know why you're so angry about this. I know why it's so hard to let go. I know why you can't forgive. I know why you're terrified. I know why you feel shame. I know why your body's aching more than it ever has. It's not your fault. I really care. You are a human being that's been put through the ringer in this pattern with your parents, with therapists, with relationships and community. You've watched yourself become an abuser. You've watched people throw themselves on your spikes, spikes that you don't know how to take down. Spikes that you've told people, could you keep away from these spikes, please? But they want to rush in. They don't listen. And it's painful every single time you see that. It's painful not to be able to change in some of these areas despite being completely lucid about what needs to change. It's painful to be more tired every year. It's painful, and I understand the pain. I don't blame you for it. I don't hate you for it. I understand. I care about you. I'm sorry. And most of all, I'm sorry because I know that you know who you want to be, who you could be, had you received a little sanity and a little support in this dynamic. I know the person you want to be right now. I know the pain you're in every day that you can't be that person. And I know the pain that no one knows the person you want to be, that no one knows who you are. Because the masks that have been wrapped around and around and around have disguised you so well with coping strategies that you are not seen and therefore cannot be loved, and that the love that wells up and percolates out through those sheets and plastic wraps gets garbled and doesn't land as love, but lands as a tangled message people don't fully understand. I know you need help to unwrap this mass of our culture's wound and shame. I know how much you've tried, and I know the sadness of failure and the hopelessness of not knowing whether or not in this lifetime you can make it through before being consumed by the toxicity of coping mechanisms that are too thick. I may never be seen by a human being in that way, because this is a two-dimensional narrative. We look at things through words, not the energy and feeling out of which the words are made. We look through our ideas, through concepts. We create pictures of material things happening, and we make judgments and evaluations. But this is not what it's like to go through that. Talking about a timeless moment, for those who have not experienced something like Vietnam, or a part of their brain shutting down, where suddenly horror becomes eternal. And then it goes. But lost in that moment, so horrifying, you will do anything to avoid it, including clinging with desperation to coping mechanisms you know are crude, you know are a mixed bag, that on the surface may do more harm than good, but deep down provide a barrier between entering another timeless bubble into a horror, into a grief, into a rage and a sadness no human being was designed to experience alone. And you may not only be alone there, but alone that you are alone. And you may not only be alone that you're alone, but judged for being alone that you're alone. And judged for the symptoms, the wild and dissociated surface behavior of a drowning man flailing around, trying to surface from that deep water and blocked by one social protocol after another that says, not at this time, not in that way, not at that volume, not in these words, that's not what we say, trying to claw his way up through an ocean of shoulds and shouldn'ts, barriers and lies that no one wants touched in the pristine world of cultural perfection that is so blasé about any human drowning in that horror, but so upset when the cutlery is a few inches off. This is not sanity. It's not humanity. It's not who we are. But it's who we cling to when the coping mechanisms of our trauma is to hang desperately, clinging like drowning rats on the norms of the day, on the perfection of performance, at the expense of who we are.